All right, you radio collectors and foolishly have collected a BC 314. Listen up. All right, there are a couple manuals for this unit. Now, just the difference of 1 year from 1945 to 1946. The same manual, the 1945 has the capacitors listed and what their values are. The 1946 don't. Well, here's the War Department Technical Manual TM 11-850. Now, TM 11-850, 15th of March 1944, including C1 February 1946. Now, that one I just said gives you the alignment. The other one, the 1945, same manual, basically tells you to send it in. In other words, you're out in the field, it doesn't work, send it back. Now, the 1946 that I just read to you tells you how to do the calibration. That was very important because you set the oscillator above the incoming frequency, and you do. You set it by 92.5 kilohertz, not megacycles, kilohertz. Now, even in the description, when they tell you how to do the alignment, they mention your generator might not go down low enough in frequency to do 92.5. I was reading that, I started laughing. Now, I did find, since the last video, I did find that there was a wrong resistor put in this radio since the day it was made. And I expected that. I expected to find something, a wire missing, a wire in the wrong place. So now I know I have a radio that's built on a Monday. Ha ha ha. And the station, WEEU, which is 830 kilohertz, kilocycles, kilohertz, falls in between the no man's zone. In other words, between the high frequency band on this and the next lower one, 830 kilohertz, is sort of at the end. The bottom band, band C, doesn't carry it at all. Band D, which is the highest frequency, it does have it. You do hear the station a little bit, but you're all the way at the end, or the bottom end of the tuning dial. Now, when I go up to 910 kilohertz, I get a really low-powered station that's less signal than WEEU, and I get it fine. So it's the radio itself. That section, it's the no man's zone. On any radio, and on the old radios, once you went above 1500, or when you're up around 1500, it really didn't pick up the stations that well because you're at the extremes. The bottom end, automatically, you have less gain on a radio. That's why I told you about Q of a coil. It's very important that the coils have enough Q so you'll have enough gain to be able to get the station. Now, I might continue a little bit further on this, hoping I can find something that's weak. I did find one of my BC 348s has the same tube set as this radio does. And it's the really old BC 348. So, and I said this wasn't similar to a BC 348, but it is to the real old one. Remember, I own 3 BC 348s, and I opened one. I opened them up real quick and looked in them, and I found that I did have the mixer. It's got a different number, but it's the same tube. You run into a lot of this stuff. Now, there are mistakes on the schematic. The resistor that I found that was wrong since the day it was made, the schematic says it's 10 meg. It's not. It's 100,000 ohms. Big difference. And the one they had in there was a 15K resistor. I hope I'm getting all this right. But in other words, if you take on this radio, expect a lot of hell. Now, in my case, I got a lot of stations. but I wanted to know if this design is good for DXing. Now, the BC348 starts off at the top of the AM broadcast band. This radio working in the area that the BC348 can do, this works fine. It's when you start going down lower in frequency and you get down to, I told you, WEU, 830 kilohertz, you barely hear it. And that's, I got a 30-foot antenna on it. And I got out one of my command radios, the one that does the AM broadcast band. I put that one on, and that gets 50% station and 50% noise. See, I got spoiled with that DX390. I think it's the DX. Yeah, the DX390. It just gets all the stations. It's got real low. The front end, the sensitivity, the microvolve sensitivity is really good. It has a large ferrite rod in it, so you can turn the radio and you can null out the noise and you get the station. So I keep thinking, you know, one of these tube radios is going to be, it's equal. Now, the NC57 is really good. All right, that's the tube radio. I think if you read up on it, it says it's got a really hot front end. That's one of my favorites. But I kept expecting to find this radio. It works really well. This BC314 works really well in the top of the AM broadcast band. It does work. So, and I know long wave is an iffy thing. In other words, someone gives you a long wave radio and you start tuning up and down. The really crappy ones will get AM broadcast stations, the real junkers like Philco's. The really good ones, years ago, they would get a beacon that would just beep, or it would tap out code, and then you'd find out what the letter was. You'd look it up in Klingenfuss's frequency guide, and it would tell you where the beacon was, what frequency it's on, and where it is, and then you could judge that whether your radio and antenna was really good or not. But I did stay with this thing. I've rebuilt not really well. I rebuilt the AM section that you can power this thing with a regular speaker. Right now, I'm using it out through the headphones into a transformer, a matching transformer. And it gets pretty good audio, and that's what I was using. And I got, like I said, I can go down to 910 kilohertz with this thing. And I get a station. It's a low power station in York, Pennsylvania. And it's closer to me than WEEU, but it's lower power and I can get it. Now, as I start going down in frequency below that, that's the last station. Now, I went and got some transistor radios and I tune them up, and they don't get any of these. I call them fringe stations. And what these stations are when someone hands you a radio, or you get a new radio and you got it all fixed, you tune into certain stations, knowing they're the more difficult ones, and you can get an idea how sensitive the radio was. And then I got into, remember I told you about microvolt sensitivity, and if you dig deep enough, you will find that the NC57, when it's all prepped up and running, it's about 1 microvolt. And that's really good, because then it's all a matter of putting a good antenna on the radio, whether you make it a box loop or something like that. But I saw this radio, this BC 314, and I saw that it had a two-tube front end, like the BC 348, and it had the lower end of the broadcast band where the BC 348 does not. And I said, let me see how this functions. And it's the beginning of the war, these designs. And then later on, they got them a little bit more perkier. And this thing, like I said, it has a 92.5 kilohertz IF system. And right in the thing, it says, your alignment generator might not go low enough. And I'm like, yeah, None of mine go that low. Nothing I have goes that low. Now, I have what's it, the ICOM R71As. I have them set up so they'll tune all the way to 0. They'll get signals at 100 kilohertz, a strong signal. And there's a way of tricking the ICOM R71A if you don't have the modded ROM board. All my ROM boards have been programmed by me. I won't go into that story, but in other words, I started using that as a what would you call it? A wave unit. Well, anyway, you can use the radio to work through the stages. Well, here's what happened. R71A has a display and a digital display, and after so many years, the capacitors in the display, they're like 10 microfarads. They dry out because it's around the display. So then you get all this hash from it, and that's what I'm trying to use it to pick up the station. So I make sure I'm using it as a wave. What the hell did they use it? Just as a signal tracer. And it's generating so much noise that it's messing up the radio I'm trying to troubleshoot. See, the R71A is all shielded. I have all the shields off on this radio because you can't work on it unless you take the shields off, which causes a problem. So this radio, the BC314, it's designed for the time. And as time went on, they realized how to make it more sensitive with less smaller coils, better tubes. So this radio, even though it's got a 2-tube front end, those tubes only equal up to a more modern tube. So what I was shooting for was something that was better than 1 microvolt front end. And this is not the radio. Now I have it, now I know. But I also noticed that when you go looking on the internet, there's very little information from anybody that's gotten one of these working. I told you a lot of the pages, the guy goes right into the dynamotor, how to service the dynamotor. And what was the other? Yeah, and then I told you there's a video where the guy cuts the capacitor cans open using a jigsaw. There's not a lot of information on this radio. And a lot of people, when someone asks a question about a BC314, right away someone jumps in and says, it's just like a BC312. But the guy's questions are about a BC314. Now I can tell you the IF is at 92.5. The BC312, it's at, let me think, 470. So they're not the same. And this is what I'm like so annoyed with the internet. There's people that shoot from the hip. It's the same radio. It's not the same radio. Now this BC314 is the same circuitry, very similar to a BC348, the real old model. All right, I don't know the dash model or whatever, but in other words, yes, because somebody did mention it's just it's the same as a BC348. Well, there's BC348s that have one less IF can than other ones. I think I got one with 4 IF cans and one with only 2. Towards the end of the war, they started cheapening those radios up because they realized that the radio it's being used to talk to an aircraft that's right next to itself. And it's really interesting when you get really deeply into this stuff. And I mean hands-on, checking resistors, changing capacitors. That's when you start to realize that a lot of what's said on the internet is total bullshit. It's shoot from the hip. And I go off on a tangent sometimes too, because I keep what I've read about what other people have said. It's in my head, and it causes bias on my point. But I've never done so much swearing in my whole life than working on this thing. And when after you get, you got the learning curve. And if you had one of these that worked perfectly, this would be a piece of cake because all you have to do is put a signal in, and on the good one, go measure how much you got in one spot. And a couple places, and you put some notes down, and you bring the piece of crap on the bench, and you do a comparison, and I got a problem in this section, or I got a problem on that section. For a while, the manual position on this radio, you have AVC, which is automatic volume control, and then a manual section. And what that does is, when you're in AVC, you're tuning the volume. When you go to manual, you're tuning the RF, and it's the same control, but it's a stacked. It's got two pots on it. So that'll confuse the crap out of you. Most radios, when you switch to manual sensitivity, you have a separate knob that you turn. You don't change the volume. The volume works the amplifier, not on this radio. See, that's the thing. It takes a while. You're like, when you do an alignment, you go into manual. You don't go into AVC. And in my case, I had bad capacitors, so the AVC and the manual work the same. No matter when you turn the switch, you didn't hear a difference. So I'm hoping that I've done enough to help you. I unfortunately, my favorite station, which after listening to it, I won't listen to that station anymore. It's very biased to against unions. It's against anybody that needs a little bit of help. And I'm neither a Democrat or a Republican, but that station is biased. It would be right media versus left. I can't handle the left either. See, what we used to hear on AM broadcasts, there's news radios, they're still on, but it's biased stuff. The bias left, bias right. And once in a while you'll bump into the guy that's telling you about the birds in your backyard and what crops you can grow in a certain area, what time of year put it in. That used to be the stuff I used to listen to. There used to be Dr. Warren Eckstein. He used to tell you about your cat or your dog, and you could call up and say, my cat's doing this, or my dog's. That stuff's not on. It doesn't seem to be on anymore. Maybe Sunday morning, Saturday morning. But this is the stuff I used to hear when I would DX at night. Casey Kasem. Remember him? You'd be DX on this station, and it would have the top 40 with Casey Kasem. And you're listening to rock and roll, the latest top 40. In the meantime, you're waiting for the station to ID. And then you had IDs, and you mark it in your little book, and you've DX'd another station. Now, when you're DXing at night, it's left or right radio, and you're like, this sucks. It's just changed. And once in a while, you'll find a station that is left or right, and they do play music once in a while now, because some of those shows that used to be on have been canceled. The network garbage, and it's all changed. But my love for radios, I can tell you exactly what caused it. I got that regenerative radio. It was KT 135 Lafayette. I got that for Christmas. And instead of my father and me going over to my aunt and uncle's house for Christmas, we stayed behind. We dropped my mother off over there, and we stayed behind, and we put together the KT 135. As soon as we were done, it came right on. It worked. And that was a shortwave, regenerative shortwave radio. The other thing that stuck in my mind was a guy died at work, and he was a ham operator. And his wife called my father up, and she says, come over and pick out a radio for your son. I know he's into shortwave. So my father and this other guy went over to the house. And my father was gone like 4 or 5 hours. And I'm waiting for him to come back. And there's no radio. And my mother asked him, like, what happened? He says, the stuff was really good and expensive. And I heard that. I'm like, okay, it was too good, too expensive for me. All right, that's special. I'm in high school. I'm a senior in high school. And the radios that this guy had were too good for me. And he didn't mention the guy that went with him. Did he take anything home to his kids? So my mother kept quiet for a while. And normally no one stuck up for me. Trust me, no one ever stuck up for me. It was just tough luck, Johnny. We didn't bring you home a radio. My mother pulled my father aside, and I could hear her say, she called you up, knowing your son liked shortwave radios. And she told you to come over here and pick something out for him. And my father's like, I don't know what my father's thinking was, but that was at the age where he started to be, my mother said, he's very jealous of you. And I'm like, a father should never be jealous of their son. But that's what my mother says. That's the best take she had. And his hearing was getting bad, which mine is now. And she says, a lot of times he's arguing on the same side as you on the argument. He just wanted to argue with me. It was just seeing me being a young buck, which I really wasn't. I was a very easygoing person. But that's where we went. That we went down that road. And in later years, all he did was bring stuff home for me to fix for his friends so he could brag. And I could fix anything. I'm telling you, this radio here, I wish I could find someone and in this area that could turn on WEEU and tell me, yeah, it doesn't work right on the bottom of that band. I don't really know. This is the conclusion I came to. And, I have 3 BC 348s, various models. They get the top of the AM broadcast band from like 1500 to 1700. They get the new band. That's where I can get the Sweet 16 station, 1600. And I don't always like putting that on because they play oldies, and it's very depressing sometimes. You remember where you were when that song came out. Maybe I was working at TRW. Maybe I was working at McGraw Edison, which was Thomas Edison's buildings in West Orange. Or maybe it was a song that was popular when I worked in RCA and Harrison on tubes. Nostalgia is fine. I notice with a lot of people they just want old cassette decks, 8-tracks. Well, I've moved forward. I do like the radios. I just told you why, and I just like working on them. I like the way the parts look, and I got burned on this one only because that one station, which I'm never going to listen to, but it drove me nuts why I couldn't get that. So I went all the way from 1500 all the way down and used my DX390, looked up each station, what the wattage was, and came all the way down to 910, and that one was fine. And then when I tried to get 830, it gets it barely. And I'm like, okay. And it is the nowhere land. When you're at the top or bottom of a radio's band, you're in nowhere's land. The radio can pick that station up if it's very strong, but you're not going to DX at the top or the bottom, unless the radio has the second band. And you'll notice that if you're picking up a station at 1500 and it's not that strong, you go to band B on most radios, and it'll start at like 1500 and up through shortwave. You go on that band, the station's a lot stronger. That's because the Q is better on that coil. Let's put it this way, you're not at the top of the band. When you go to the next band, the station will be up higher, and the Q is better, and you get more sensitivity, not selectivity. But all this stuff. But I was sort of laughing. I'm like, that WEEU on this radio is in the no man's zone, and I'm going to poke around a little bit more. Like I said, I found a resistor that was the wrong value in the mixer circuit. It was 15K instead of 100K, but the schematic says to put in a 10K. There are mistakes on the schematics. I'm going to warn you. I found a few, but if you have one of these radios and you're really good at repairing, it'll be a real challenge. And the other thing too is you're not 72 years old, and when you get older, you become very aggravated very quickly. And I got so aggravated this morning on this radio. I had to go go lay down. I'm stressing out over it because I went all the way down that band, and I'm tweaking all the controls, and then I started looking through all the PDFs that I have, and I realized the same number, TM11-50, has like 4 different types, and one has the capacitor values, but it doesn't say what they are, and the other one has capacitor values and it does say what they are, and then the other one tells you, the other one has the alignment has been added to the manual, and the other one says send it back. So it takes a lot of work. Oh, and when you're troubleshooting this, you have to go through one manual, a TM11-850, for the good schematics, and the other one for the capacitors. The one with the capacitors, they eliminated some of the schematics. and how each section works. So you're going to have to get several of the TM11-850 schematic sets, and then relabel the. Go in here. I don't know if you know how to relabel a program, but I have mine relabeled caps, and then the other one schematics, and they're PDFs. But after the number TM11-850 for the PDF, one says caps, and then I relabeled the other one schematics. And I have to jump back and forth. It's really annoying. And when you're in the cap section and you're in the PDF, you have to scroll because it has the caps for all four models, or let's say three models of the BC 314. There's one that has the AC supply built in it, and that same booklet does BC 312. I think I got all the numbers right, and hopefully it doesn't do that slowing down thing. Let me check to see if it's jumped out of record. No, it seems to still be recording. Yeah, let me see if it goes really slow like that sometimes. I think that's it. All right, that's it.